Welcome back, everybody. Another edition here of the Auburn Undercover podcast on the 24/7 Sports Network. My name is Nathan King, joined here today by Jason Caldwell. Selection Sunday has come and gone, one of the most exciting evenings of the year, and it started with the first name being called was the Auburn Tigers for the first time in program history. They are the number one overall seed. For the second time in program history, they are a 1 seed. But we're going to get all into Auburn's bracket today. Our thoughts on the outlook for the Tigers, as we knew this was going to be the case for weeks now. They are going to start in Lexington on Thursday. They will play the play-in game. They'll play a first four team, the winner of St. Francis versus Alabama State. So could be the Hornets from right down the road. That would obviously be really, really exciting for them to play against them. Like a couple years ago, they played Jacksonville State. And so, Jason, we'll jump into it. But first of all, I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on the SEC tournament. And I don't think it was a overly surprising result. I think me and a lot of other people went there and said, yeah, Auburn's probably going to win a game, and then we'll see about Saturday. It's going to be a really tough matchup either way against Tennessee or Texas A&M. I don't really feel that different than I felt about this team beforehand. A 5-point loss where the free throw differential was just pretty much insurmountable. Didn't change much of what I think about this team losing the SEC tournament, but it continues. Now this team's lost 3 of their last 4 games. Continues that they've certainly got some things to work on heading into March Madness, and they would definitely not say they're playing their best right now.
Yeah, honestly, we've seen it kind of coming on for the last couple of weeks, and it was kind of continuation of things. It's honestly, I think, if you want to go try to compete for a national championship, I think you needed a reset, and it probably took something like these last couple of weeks for that to happen, because I don't think this team is going to make a long-term run in the NCAA tournament playing the way it is right now. But I think it's good enough to go make a run in the NCAA tournament, but you got to get back to doing the things you do really well. But I think that showed up again in the NCAA tournament. Still not much of anything from Chaney Johnson. Todd Pettiford, if he doesn't score or play, it's going to be really difficult. And we see, Miles Kelly, Chad had a better second half, but you put yourself kind of in a little bit of a hole there midway through the second half by not having 2 of the guys you depend on score. So honestly, I kind of think about this team, and I've been thinking about what we've seen it kind of morph into. Now, you had one game at Kentucky where Miles Kelly went nuts, and you did those things, but this has essentially become a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar Lakers offense, where you're getting the ball to a guy in the post and he's making a post move, and that's the offense. They got to get back to sharing the basketball. If you look at when this team played its best, now Broome was in the post doing some of those things too, but it didn't become I'm going to keep dribbling and keep backing you down and keep backing you down until I can get a shot off. It was, okay, quick decision, get rid of the basketball, share it, pass it, knock down a shot. And now it's become dribble the basketball, shoot a contested 3, or Broome make a move in the post. And those are difficult. It's difficult to play that way. And you look at Auburn's offense, and it hasn't been anything close to the efficient offense that we were used to seeing from this team. So, yeah, honestly, I think a reset was needed for them. And I think they're very capable of going on and making a long run, but they got to get back, you're right, to doing the things that they do the best.
Yeah, I think their defensive intensity was fine the last couple of games. I'm not necessarily concerned that much about that. But yeah, you score 62 and 65 points in 2 games in Nashville, and you're not exactly glowing about the offense. Bruce Pearl said it Saturday at his press conference in Nashville. I didn't go to I went to the locker room and said, but so I was kind of poring over his comments afterwards, and he said, maybe we're playing through Janai a little bit too much, was what he said. So I asked him about that last night, and he said, he was like, I'm glad you asked, because I wanted to kind of clarify what I meant. He thinks that Auburn can get more transition opportunities.
Correct.
And I think it's one thing to look at this offense being the most efficient half-court offense in the country, which they are and have been for the entire season, but you don't want to use that as a crutch. And like you said, this team has been at their best when it's like they have that potential to get out and run.
Yes, correct.
And that's part of their I think it goes back to kind of what you said of like, then every possession doesn't become dumping the ball to Broome. down low. Yeah, I mean, look, Todd Pettiford, is going to that stat line is going to draw eyes against Tennessee. But number one, that's a really tough matchup, and it was
Right.
for the first time. I mean, like, Zakai Ziegler is going to relish the opportunity, and Jemai Meshack are going to relish the opportunity against a freshman. They just are. They're the two of the best defensive guards in the country. But that was probably the first time in how long that Todd Pettiford didn't show up in a game away from Neville Arena against a good team. Like I don't necessarily think that's going to be the way he plays in the NCAA tournament. Chaney Johnson had a couple really good offensive moments from the 3-point line. Had more rebounds. I believe he had 7 rebounds against Tennessee, and so he was starting to get that back a little bit. You saw it in that Ole Miss game when he grabbed that first rebound. I thought about what you said. I was like, that was his first defensive rebound since Kentucky.
Yeah.
So I thought there was a little bit. I thought physicality. I don't think this team was really lacking.
No.
I don't think that was an issue. They thought maybe it was. Obviously, they wanted to focus on that. But you kind of just you've got to kind of feel for Chaney Johnson. I mean, there were some just turnaround, put back, one hand. I mean, like, they just weren't going for him. And he said it after the Ole Miss game. He was like, man, I thank the Lord after I made that 3, because he was like, I just can't. He's like, I'm not seeing it right now. I just can't put the ball in the basket around the rim. Like, he knows that it's just kind of not working for him right now. But this was one of Auburn's most efficient players. This was their most efficient player from 2-point range all season long. And so you don't necessarily think that's gonna change going into the NCAA tournament. And like you said, they don't need to play. And we'll get into what their second round game could be. They don't need to play their best basketball of the entire season. I think to make the Sweet 16, looking at that 8-9 matchup, B+, A- game, like, you're gonna need to go out there and play pretty darn well. We'll start now, Jason, with the first game on Thursday. You broke down St. Francis and Alabama State. Tell me a little bit about a couple teams that, as usual, like, you're always going to go into this and say, yep, massive underdog, probably can't do it. Auburn's, I mean, these are the 2 lowest rated teams on KenPom. Auburn could play all season. Like, it is going to be a tremendous challenge for them to even be in this game, but we've seen it happen. Tell me a little bit about, what they could do to make things difficult for Auburn, because obviously these are 2 teams that won their league this year.
Yeah, and I think you're right, different teams. Alabama State does not have a lot of size. That's normally what you would expect. Neither team has a lot of size. You would probably feel maybe different about this game if this was, because back in the day, I remember thinking, like, the 16 seeds were a team like a Princeton, an Ivy League team, where they were really structured. Yale would have been a 16 seed back in the day. Now those teams have gotten a more there's been more leagues, there's more branch offs, all those things. So it's a little different feel. You would probably feel different if these were really structured teams. Now, Alabama State, I think, is a better team than St. Francis in terms of athletically. They come into it and they got some players. They won 19 games. What's interesting is Tony Madlock, a former Auburn assistant, is the head coach at Alabama State. His son, one of the best players for this team. They don't shoot it very well and give up 72 points a game, but they played some pretty good teams. LSU, SMU, Southern Miss, Missouri. They lost by an average of like 18 points a game to those teams, but the only real size they have is just Stephen Walker, 6'10", 190. So this is a big, long guy. I think it'd be a really difficult matchup because of Auburn's size and physicality for a team like Alabama State. They'd have to come out and shoot it really well. They don't do that. And then St. Francis is an interesting one because you look at them and they're 16-17 going into this thing and won 6 games in a row to get to 16-17. I mean, they were 10-17, won 6 in a row, got hot at the end, had to win at Central Connecticut State in the conference tournament championship game on the other team's home court to make it 46-43 basketball game. And so, I think you look at it and from, there's some 16 seeds that might give you a little bit of pause. And Riley Parker's an Australian kid that can really shoot the basketball. He's like 40% from 3, 86% from the free throw line. But not a big physical team. So you look at it and from an Auburn perspective, we know how Bruce Pearl handles things, and they will come into this game prepared. And I honestly think the end of this season, Yale last year, all those things should make for a very focused Auburn team on the first weekend. And that's what they need to be. And so that starts, I think, with this matchup. I mean, Auburn comes out and prepared and goes out and plays, then they won't have any problems advancing to the second round.
Yeah, these are the two, and as it should be if you're the number one overall seed. When you look at Ken Palm, when you look at any sort of metrics of anything, these are the two worst teams in the field by a pretty decent margin, actually, over Duke's play-in game that they're going to have. Like they're pretty low down there. Like you mentioned, St. Francis is that the NEC was hilarious all year because there was only one team. Central Connecticut was like the only team with a winning record pretty much the entire season, like period in the league. And then you get to the conference tournament, they were I'm sure a tremendous favorite in that tournament, and they weren't able to pull it off. And so, yeah, I mean, Auburn should be able to. And I think most of the time, just going out and killing a team in the first game is not like it doesn't really tell you much. Like you're obviously way better than them. I sort of wonder if, and maybe this is just a glass half full perspective. Like I sort of wonder if Auburn needs to go like win by 35 over somebody just to get back in that arena and remind themselves of. And look, Auburn hasn't played like they're one shot away from beating Alabama. They had opportunities. It's like they play terribly
against really good teams.
Correct, against elite 2, 1, 2, 3 seed type competition. You get back to it and say, this is what you're capable of. This is the type of team that you are. You should be able to beat up on somebody who's obviously lower than you. I think maybe that could be important for them in this game. But looking to the second round, probably one of the biggest surprises of the entire tournament field, I don't think that's outlandish to say, is the fact that number one, Louisville was an 8 seed. Bruce Pearl said most of the things they had them at a 6 or a 7. Some people had them as a 5 on Sunday morning. They end up as an 8 seed. Not only are they an 8 seed, they are an 8 seed against the number one overall seed. Not only that, they are going to play in Lexington, Kentucky, 73 minutes from their campus. And so regardless of if they play Auburn, obviously in that first game against Creighton, so they're the 8 seed, Creighton is the 9 seed there. Regardless, they're going to have a huge home crowd advantage. Think about when Auburn played Houston and Birmingham, played Iowa and Birmingham even. Like their fans are going to be able to just kind of come from up the road. Look, we could sit here and talk about why that's a bizarre choice. Look, it was a bizarre choice when they did it to Houston. I didn't blame Kelvin about it. I didn't blame Kelvin Sampson for being very upset when that happened. And then Auburn looked like they were making it a game for a while. We can talk about that, but at the end of the day, you and I were talking about it last night. Like the reality is, you got to go beat a bunch of good teams to make it to the Final Four and try to win a title. And if you're not able to beat Louisville or Creighton, because I think people are just focusing on Louisville, like Creighton's really good too.
Yeah.
If you're not able to beat one of those teams, you probably weren't going to make it very far anyway. And so two very, very good teams there in the round of 32 for Auburn. I thought one of the best 8-9 matchups in the field, probably between Louisville and Creighton. And look, they're on the level of some of Auburn's SEC competition this season, so that's a good thing. Auburn's seen teams around this quality all year long, but man, Louisville in particular, one of the hottest teams in the country, just they beat up on everybody in the ACC. Like they lost at Georgia Tech and they lost to Duke. Other than that, they just beat up on everybody in the ACC. And then you look at Greg McDermott and Creighton. That's a tournament coach who's done it before, and they've got one of the best big men in the country. So regardless, I think you're going to be in for a battle in the round of 32. It's going to take, like I said, it's going to take a really good game played from Auburn on Saturday in order to make it to the second weekend.
Yeah, no question about it. You're right. You're going to face teams that are going to have a crowd advantage. And again, Louisville and Lexington, yeah, to me, it's more about the seeding because I thought they were probably more deserving of a better seed. But the flip side, these things don't ever work out because nothing makes sense. Because you look at Louisville and you go, okay, well, Louisville lost to – they did beat Clemson, but they lost to Duke twice, and there's really nobody else in that league that was really any good this season. They also played 4 SEC teams and lost to all 4 of them. And so you look and go, okay, well, if they don't get credit for winning games against the ACC, then how does North Carolina get in the tournament? It shouldn't be there. Those two things should not be the same. If North Carolina's in the tournament, then Louisville should be a 6 probably because you go, okay, well, North Carolina's getting credit for winning games against those teams. Well, then Louisville didn't. So it doesn't make any sense. Thus the rub of a selection committee and having people involved. But yeah, this is a Louisville team. The thing that's the most dangerous part about Louisville for me is backcourt. The NCAA tournament is a guard-oriented game. that's where you live. And Terrence Edwards and Chucky Hepburn are really good. Those guys average like 33, 34 points a game combined, can shoot it. They're really well coached, and they're going to come in with the chip on their shoulder too, because they feel like they're getting disrespected being an 8th seed. But you're right. It's a tough matchup because Creighton, Ryan Kalkbrenner is really good. He's almost 20 points a game, 8.8 rebounds. He can shoot it from the perimeter. He's a Walker Kessler kind of guy, but he can shoot. I mean, he can really score. And so not quite as athletic as Kessler, but big, long range guy. Got a couple of guards that can shoot, and they're tough. I mean, they played in the Big East. They're physical. So, yeah, that's going to be a war right out of the gate in Lexington on Thursday morning, and it should be a fun game to watch.
Yeah, just looking at Louisville, I mean, I think people are a little more frightened of Louisville, but like you said, it's kind of pick your poison. I think I don't think Auburn is any better equipped to play one of these teams versus the other. I think I would be the same amount of concern / you need to play well level for either of these, because like you said, it's the guard or it's the big men.
Yeah.
You're going to need to defend, and something our Isaac Trotter wrote about, who does a great job for us and CBS Sports. The first thing he put in a notebook yesterday about, hey, what matchups do you like in the field? He was like, man, Auburn's path to the Sweet 16 actually looks really good. And his point was both Creighton and Louisville rely on the 3-point shot. They're top 20 nationally in 3-point rate, and their defensive tempo is not necessarily at the level of some of the teams Auburn has seen. And so his point is, look, Auburn has been top 10 nationally in 3-point defense all year. We've seen that all season, Jason, against Tennessee and Alabama. We just saw it the last few weeks. They're like, no, we're running you off the 3-point line. You're going to have to drive. Now these teams are driving better than they have recently, and Auburn has to be better at that. But like, that is going to be what they are going to do against Creighton and Louisville. Both of these teams are going to need to get hot from 3. And Auburn feels like they can win the 3-point line. Isaac's point was basically like, Auburn has a good defensive matchup to try to slow these teams. And you look at an Auburn team that's been the best offense in the country all year. And so it's like, good luck trying to keep pace with this Auburn team. And so it goes back to what we talked about at the outset. I think if they get playing the level that they were, I mean, if they're anything close to what they were when they played at Rupp last, which was like, get everyone involved, I just don't see you get Auburn into the 80s. I just don't see anybody keeping up with them in the first weekend because of the defensive intensity that they've been able to play with. But regardless, they're going to need to go out there and play a good game. Looking to now the Sweet 16, if Auburn were to make the second weekend. Goodness, Jason, storylines are all over the place for this region for Auburn. I mean, like, man, you couldn't have panned it out any better. It would be in the Sweet 16, the winner of Michigan, UC San Diego versus Texas A&M / Yale. So 3 of those 4 teams have some storylines for you. If you face the 5 seed Michigan, Trey Donaldson is obviously one of their best players this year. Michigan just won the Big Ten tournament. KT Harrell is on that staff as well. So we'd be remiss not to mention that. Yale, don't have to say anything about that. If I think this team would love a shot at Yale again. Because I think a shot at Yale again may mean, that you wouldn't face Texas A&M. And I'm interested where you come down on the potential for them to face A&M, Jason, because matchup. Like, yes, it's a tough matchup for Auburn. I also think Auburn would have a week in between to prepare for a game that they would be dying to play again after what happened in College Station. And so I think it's not, from a 4-5 perspective, this isn't the worst you could have gotten. Like, sure, you drew A&M, which people probably are like, oof, that's easily Auburn's worst matchup. But again, you're going to have to go out there and play a good game and play better, physically, and have a good rebounding game to try to win this whole tournament. And so I think A&M would be, hey, it'd be a buck up moment. It'd be like, hey, are you ready to do this thing? And if they beat A&M in Atlanta, I kind of think they would have a good chance to go to the Final Four after that. Yeah. So it's storyline-driven potential Sweet 16 matchups for this Auburn team.
Yeah, I think it's you look at it, and the interesting thing is there's another twist in this one too. Danny Wolf's at Michigan as well, who was on that Yale team last year, big man. So you have a couple of additional. There would be an individual one, but that'd give you a little bit more extra motivation against Michigan. Yeah, look, you don't need anything if you're in a Sweet 16 Elite Eight matchup. You should be, but I do think that if you were to face Texas A&M, we talked about this last night after kind of all the dust had settled. But look, I think this Auburn team needs a little motivation, and I think you'll get motivation in Lexington in the second round, because there's going to be people that go, well, I think they're going to get upset by the way Auburn finished this season. So you're going to have that. You look up and you go, a lot of people are picking Michigan State. There's motivation there. Well, if you get to face Texas A&M, people are going to go up. There's your upset. I honestly think it's a great thing for this Auburn team, because I think right now they need to get a little prodded a little bit, because you're talking about it. Look, this team is still playing really good basketball. They just happen to play some good teams, and they're not playing their best basketball. Still playing good. You got to get back to playing your best basketball. And so, transition, one of those things too. Rebounding, more rebounds, more transition, more fast break points, and that you look up, and I would guess that it's been quite a long time since Auburn had a boatload of transition baskets in a game, and so those are things you get. You're going to have to rebound the basketball no matter who you play, and I think there's some motivation, but I think it's one of those things where if you get to Texas A&M in Atlanta and you're Auburn, you don't need anything else to get you ready to play that game.
Yeah, looking toward the bottom here. So this would only be potential Elite Eight matchups here at the bottom in the South region. Iowa State is the 3 seed. Auburn, of course, has seen them and beat them. It is worth noting Iowa State sucks. It sucks for them. They're going to be without Keyshawn Gilbert for the rest of the season. That just, it's there's a lot of injuries across college basketball right now going into the tournament, and that's just really unfortunate. Marquette, New Mexico is the 7-10 game. Talk about another. The field's just good this year. Like, there's just a lot of good teams. Marquette is a really good 7 seed. New Mexico is a really good 10 seed. Like, they were like 8-9 line potential when you looked at some of the projections. And then you mentioned the 2 seed, so the second best team in Auburn's region ends up being Michigan State. I think Michigan State is playing some of the best basketball in the country. Toward the end of the season here. They lost in the Big Ten tournament, but a team with a lot of size, a lot of physicality. Of course, if you just go chalk, that would then be the team to come out and face Auburn in the Elite Eight. But lots of potential there, and you've also got Ole Miss as the 6th seed at the bottom there, and they are playing the play-in game between San Diego State and North Carolina. So,
Dang, that's, to me, Ole Miss is playing really well, but
they are. Yeah,
we have seen an 11 seed in these play-in games make a run almost every year. That's the one that I would point to right there. San Diego State's not San Diego State of the past, still good.
Beat Houston.
North Carolina, yeah, Duke didn't have Cooper play. North Carolina has some guys that can make shots. They're not real big, but Ole Miss isn't real big either. And so it's almost a really similar matchup if you get a North Carolina Ole Miss game a little bit. Ole Miss plays better defense. That could be a really, really interesting game to play early on in an NCAA tournament.
Yeah, look, Iowa State is going to be good regardless. I think it'd be foolish to count them out. I think because you look at what's on the other side, so they got to play Lipscomb, and then they got to play the winner of that game. I think Iowa State has a really, really good chance to make the Sweet 16. Like, I don't really think anyone else in their little, the 4-team sub-region, I don't think anyone else is going to keep up with them. I know they're down one of their best players, if not their best player. And then we mentioned Michigan State. So again, I think Auburn has. I understand looking at it that this was, and they put up the numbers during the selection show. Auburn has the toughest region by seeding. They have the lowest combined seed lines. So basically, like, when you look at the total seeds, okay, a 2 seed could be one of 4 spots. I don't know if that makes any sense to everybody, but like, they have the lowest combined number of seeds. Like when you're talking like AP rankings and stuff like that, lower numbers are better. Technically, they have the best region, the best region from top to bottom in terms of the seed lines. Texas A&M really stands out. That potential second round game stands out. Michigan's playing great basketball right now, but at the end of the day, I think this is an Auburn team that has done it a lot of different ways under Bruce Pearl. They've also lost a lot of different ways. They've lost to teams they probably shouldn't have lost to. They lost to a number 1 overall seed. They lost to a team in Miami that was clearly a buzzsaw that year. And then when they went to the Final Four, I mean, I don't really remember that much of what we were all saying when that bracket came out. But like, nobody was thinking Auburn was going to do anything in that region. I mean, you look at the path they were going to have to go on. And so when you're a number 1 seed, your path is not going to be anything like that. They're not going to play a bunch of top seeds, but it is a bunch of really interesting matchups. I mean, we could talk about it till we're blue in the face, but there is a reason that people will continue. Like, Auburn is a team that people just kind of think is going to work their way to the Final Four and has been a national title, favorite all season. I think Florida's playing the best basketball of anyone in the country right now. I think they are the best team in the country right now.
Right today.
I think Duke is the most talented team in the country right now. I think the best overall team, when you look at balance and what they've done throughout the season, is Auburn. And so when you hit that tournament reset button, that's what they need. They need that right now, and they need to get back to how they're playing basketball. I still do think, though, they can make the Sweet 16 without playing their A-plus game, but you just kind of worry about that second round matchup.
Yeah, and there's the thing, it's like people are like, oh, you're worried about momentum. Well, Auburn had all the momentum last year and lost to Yale in the first round. You never know. Alabama lost its first SEC tournament game a year ago and made the Final Four. You just don't know. That's the part of it. You don't know how teams respond, how they match up. This is an older veteran team, been there, done that, with a lot of want to based on last season. And hey, this could very well be a Virginia type thing. And I hate to bring up Virginia, but that team won a national championship the year before. They lost as a 1 seed to a 16, and they heard it for a year. Auburn's heard about Yale for a year, a solid year. That should be plenty to get you ready to go and get you back reset. And so, and I honestly don't think that having an extra day off and not having to go to war with Florida after going to war a day with Tennessee is a bad thing for this Auburn team, to give you a couple of extra days of rest to get prepared for the NCAA tournament. So before we get out of this bracket, though, you see San Diego, Michigan has a tough one in that game. That team won at Utah State. Tate Jones is a really good player. I actually watched him because I know Justin Ferguson, our bud, has been talking about the Tritons all year. So I watched them play over the weekend. That's a good basketball team. And when you go 30-4, I don't care who you play, you're pretty good. That's going to be a really interesting game for a Michigan team that, hey, we just saw make a run and go all the way through the Big Ten tournament. Sometimes that's great. Sometimes it's not. And so I think that's going to be a fun one to watch.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan lost their last 3 games of the regular season, and they lost 4 of their last 6. And then they went to the Big Ten tournament and started out by just annihilating Purdue. And then they got a close win over Maryland, and then a close win over Wisconsin. So again, just goes to show. And there's a conference tournament reset button for some teams. Like it's
you never know.
It just goes to show, if you're a good team, all that matters is if you're a good team, because that way you put yourself in position to do something like that. And so yeah, I think some people have been talking about Michigan. It's like I saw somebody say yesterday, is Michigan going to win their conference tournament and then lose their first game in the NCAA tournament? I think that's a tough draw for them as well. We'll touch just real quickly on the rest of the bracket. Obviously, won't go through every single game. Trying to look here through some matchups that are interesting. St. John's is obviously playing incredible basketball here this season. I think they have a pretty good shot to make the Elite Eight and have an opportunity to go to the Final Four, because Texas Tech in that sub region is really the only team that gives me pause. For them, Florida has a I think Florida's playing the best basketball in the country right now. Nobody would argue. They've got a tough road because you've got St. John's and Texas Tech in there. I'm sure they didn't love seeing
a potential second round game with UConn.
You don't love it. I mean, no. UConn's not very good, but
here's the thing: they know how to win. They're really physical. They can match up with you from a size perspective a little bit. There's a lot of teams I wouldn't want to see on an 8 line, and that'd probably be one of them. Oklahoma, I just don't know that they're going to have enough interior game to win an NCAA tournament game. Now, they can get hot shooting a 3, but it's tough to depend on that.
My least favorite potential game in the entire field is Houston Gonzaga in the second round, because what that means is that one of those teams will not be making the second weekend, and it probably will be Gonzaga. But like that's just brutal. I mean, it makes sense. It's Gonzaga was going to play a 1 seed, like they
Yes,
were going to be
that's
on the
where they
8 line.
were.
I think some people thought they might move up to the 7 line when they won but actually St. Mary's ends up being a 7 seed.
Yeah,
So that
the
was
regular season, what they did through the whole year, even though Gonzaga, well, I guess St. Mary's won the regular season, and Gonzaga won the tournament. So St. Mary's won 2 out of 3. That's probably what they deserve. There are a couple of interesting ones for me. Missouri drawing Drake is a difficult matchup. I think that's a tough 6-11 if you're Missouri. And then, I think even a Maryland Grand Canyon game. We saw Grand Canyon last year. Maryland at times looks unbeatable, and then the other times you look up and they don't look interested. And so I don't know. There's some fun games on that side.
Yeah, the potential for noticed this yesterday. So it'd be the potential for Tennessee, Kentucky for a third time this season in the Midwest region would be interesting, because Kentucky had their number.
Kentucky rematch. Illinois is a team that people talk about how talented they are, and yet they've played terrible for much of the year. High Point, Purdue, that's a trendy potential upset pick, and just face it, Purdue just has not played very well for much of the year. And you saw Auburn just destroy that team. I don't know how good they are, and they faded at the end of the year. That's an interesting game.
Yeah, looking at Duke's draw here, I think a lot of people are talking about Duke's region being the path, the Elite Eight being a little bit easier than Auburn's. I think it probably is. I still wouldn't want to see somebody like Baylor. I wouldn't want to see somebody like Oregon, and Arizona is like one of the better 4 seeds you're going to have, just again because the field is so good. Like there's so many good teams. Arizona is a really good 4 seed. You and I were talking about before we got rolling, though. I would make a safe bet on Alabama in the Elite Eight. I mean they seem like they are a lot better than everyone else there.
And here's the thing. I like St. Mary's, but St. Mary's that's a terrible matchup to play that Alabama team, because St. Mary's, they're just going to get run off of everything in that game. On the other side of that one, Wisconsin, I mean, they have been scoring more, and then they just were terrible in the Big Ten championship. BYU's been a hot basketball team. They've been playing well, but again, you always look for matchups. Matchups are always the most important thing. I don't see a whole lot of teams that are going to be able to match up with Alabama on that side, playing the way they play. BYU is probably the most likely one, and I would say that's probably the team that has the best chance of playing out with Alabama to get out of that region.
Yeah, and I mean, like Vanderbilt, like really, that is not going to go well. I would say Alabama in the Sweet 16 is one of the safest bets in the tournament. That's what
it sure feels like it right now. Even though, I mean, you look at it and go, man, they lost what, I don't know, 5 out of their last 8 games or something like that. But again,
4 or 6, yeah,
they played really good teams. That's the thing. You look at it and you go, well, this team won a bunch of games in a row. Yeah, but if they had to play what Alabama faced or what Auburn faced or whoever faced in this league, what would that record look like? And now we have to find out, and it showed up like for the Big 12 the last couple of years. Does that wear on you so much that you can't play the NCAA tournament? Because it happened to the Big 12 last year. Those teams didn't have anybody in the Final Four, and they were really deep and really talented. How much has it worn on teams in this league this season, and will it have an effect in the NCAA tournament? We'll find out.
Yeah, I mean, Bruce Pearl talked about it before Auburn played Alabama. Actually, he said, Alabama's not in a slump. They had lost 4 or 6, and he was like, "Look at who they lost to. Anyone in the country would have lost those." It's funny, he couldn't name the 4th team. He was like, "They lost to this," and then he was like, "They lost somebody else," and we were like, "You?"
Yeah.
And he was like, "Yeah, number 1 team in the country. Like, really not that big of a deal." And he said, "If we go lose to Alabama, we are not in a slump, because we've lost at State." So it's like, I understand where people are at now, and I think a healthy amount of concern is fine, and I think a healthy amount of like, no, you need to play better basketball is totally fine. You got to use the context of who you've played. At the same time, though, I wrote a story like after they played Tennessee, and it's like, hey, they're not going to see teams this good for a while. they now might see somebody like Sweet 16 caliber in the round of 32 in
Yeah,
Louisville.
correct.
So it's not maybe as far away as you thought it would be. And if you make the Sweet 16, all of a sudden that A&M team is obviously going to be the chalk favorite to get there. And so I just think look, they played well in Rupp. And I think something to note too is like Louisville's going to have a lot of fans, and they're going to have more fans than Auburn if they end up playing that team. They'll have the most fans there because they can just come from down the road, like just casually. You can, hey, do you want to go to the game tomorrow? Like that is a possibility for them. Talking to people for months, like Auburn has had this on lock. They've had Lexington on lock. Like there are going to be a lot of Auburn fans at that game. It
Correct.
would not surprise me if Auburn Louisville ended up like a 50-50 game. I don't really pay attention to the crowd doesn't really do it for me in the NCAA tournament. Like talk to me when we get to Atlanta and it's like, yeah, like 12,000 Auburn fans potentially, like the biggest alumni base in the country there in Atlanta. Like, yeah, that can make a difference. But like comes to the first weekend, I think the bigger thing is like, no, Louisville and Creighton are really good. I don't really think that the Kentucky narrative, like playing there, don't necessarily think that's too big of a deal. I just think you drew a really good 8-9 matchup in the second round.
I agree. Yeah, you're right. It's just a matter of going to playing basketball. And this team has done that consistently all season long. Sometimes you shoot it well, sometimes you don't. Again, I think as long as the defensive intensity is there, and it has been, take care of the basketball. Those are two things you have to do in the NCAA tournament. And then here's the one thing. They got to shoot free throws better. And some of that comes because it's Janai Broome getting fouled. He's had really good games, and then he's had games where he hasn't shot it as well. This team has a lot of guys that can shoot free throws and shoot them really good. And I think we've seen Denver Jones be more aggressive taking the ball to the basket a little bit. I think that's the key now. Him and Miles Kelly and Tahad Pettiford, those guys, Shamek Mazzara. We talked about it. NCAA tournament is guards. That's what it is. It's guard play. And now Janai Broome obviously is the national player of the year. But this will ultimately rest on how well those guys play in the backcourt, protecting the basketball, getting to the free throw line, knocking down shots. So this becomes a guard game when you get it this time of year.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of an under maybe until Tennessee because they're such a good backcourt defense. But like up until that game, guards were even in some of your losses. Like guards were doing it for you. Even though they went to A&M, like Chad Baker-Mazara and Todd Pettiford were awesome in that game, and you didn't have Denver Jones. It all started with the Kentucky game. Like it was the first day of March, and it was like, hey, Auburn's guards are on it, and it's March. So like those two things usually are. This is the most encouraged I think you've been about a backcourt at Auburn since the Final Four team. Like this is the most like these guys are capable of getting it done, and kind of each of them has done it in their own way. Like Miles Kelly maybe is not shooting consistently right now. Like okay, you know what he can do. Denver Jones is, I mean, a healthy Denver Jones. I know they didn't win against Tennessee, but you mentioned it, like driving to the basket, playing defense. Like he just. I mean, it's tough to underscore how much of a difference he makes for this team. And so getting him healthier is really important. And then Todd Pettiford, we knew he was going to be a March X factor. When he has a game like that, that's not really going to help. But he hadn't had a bunch of games like that. He's had a bunch of games like what we've come to expect from him. And so you would think he's going to get back to that. Thursday at 1:50 Central Time, correct? Or is it 1:50 Eastern Time?
It is 1:50 Central Time. Yeah, because there's a game before. Central. There's a game before. Okay. So so it's first game that Louisville Creighton game's at 11:15-ish or something like that, and then Central Time that Auburn did 1:50 Central Time. So we'll be there traveling different paths to get there, but we'll be there, and it's going to be here's the thing about it, it's going to be a very busy weekend in Lexington, Kentucky, because Auburn baseball will be there as well, starting a series Friday at 5:30-ish or so Central Time. So you'll have lots of folks, and I think people have already planned ahead and bought some baseball tickets up. So we'll be there doing double duty, doing a little bit of both, and looking forward to it.
Should be great. Should be a good time. Best time of the year. And obviously Auburn has, like Bruce Pearl said yesterday, he said, these are the highest expectations I have ever had going into an NCAA tournament.
And that's what it should be.
It should be when you're the number 1 overall seed. So it's like, here we go. It's time. It's time for your tremendous body of work throughout the season to finally pay off. And again, I just think it's so important to win games. Like, duh, you're going to lose. Like, if you lose, you're out. this team gets to Atlanta, I just think they've got a good shot. I just think they got a good shot if they can get back to State Farm Arena. And so we'll see how it goes. Should be a great week. AuburnUndercover.com. We're going to, like I said, Jason's already had the preview of the first games. I'm going to have a preview of the potential second games. And there's really no use trying to go through all of it. We're going to have a ton of stuff and continuing through the rest of the week. Me, Jason, and Philip will all be there in Lexington. And Patrick will be there as well. So it's AuburnUndercover.com. Don't need to be anywhere else. We're going to have you guys covered from top to bottom. So for Jason Caldwell, I'm Nathan King. Thank you guys so much for joining us today on the Auburn Undercover podcast, and we will talk to you all soon.